Kia ora everyone, we'll resume the Economic Development Committee meeting. Apologies to our external visitors. I know we were due to start at 1 o'clock, but our business required just a little later start. We have already dealt with apologies this morning, so can we move to item number 2, notification of additional items? I have not been advised. There being none, we'll move to item number 3, declarations of interest. Advised I have been advised of any declaration. There being none, we'll move to item number 4, public comment. Talia, you're not aware of any public comment. Then we'll move to item number 5, which is first presentation from Race Incorporated. And we have the Chief Executive of Race, Alistair Robertson. So Alistair, thank you for taking up the presentation to come and share with us today. So if you're familiar with how the traffic light system works, 10 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today to very briefly the Amber talk about the proposed synthetic track being installed in our The genesis of the track initiative lay in the strategy shared with you some years ago now, proposing to New Zealand thoroughbred racing, Palmerston becomes one of 3 racing and training seasons. It also becomes one of the main racing So that initiative was to have 3 racing and training centres of excellence and 4 racing centres of excellence, Awapuni being a part of both of those. Pleased to say this is now about to be realised, and we will see race meetings go from 18 to 36 per annum at Palmerston North. Course numbers targeted to grow from 280 to 150 plus. Direct GDP growth go from 17.5 million to 25.6 million. Produce a showcase week that this year sadly was struck down by COVID, and to create a large downstream economic region. I'm pleased to say that is all about to come to fruition with the agreement of the Minister to co-fund a synthetic track at Awapuni. The Provincial Growth Fund has committed to $10.5 million towards the project. On the proviso, I fund a further $3 million towards the total build cost of $13.5 million and go to contract by the 23rd of June this year. To explain what a synthetic track is, I have this diagram, which I think I've shared with you before, but they're very special things. Basically, there's a sub-road base, and there can be either a drainage system or there can be a gravity feed system on the inside. Then there's very carefully selected stone. A porous macadam comes in then. So you've got a hard base to drive or walk or gallop on, but it's full of holes, like honeycomb chocolate. And then the compound on top, and it drains through it fantastically. So wet or dry, you have a surface that can cope with almost an infinite number of forces and be in great condition, not mud, not wet. The best in the world is acknowledged to be Martin Collins Polytrack. I have a very brief promotional video for you.
Developed using a mix of sand and recycled man-made materials such as fibre, all coated in wax, Polytrack allows excellent drainage, yet still acts like turf in its root structure. With Polytrack, where the horse's foot lands, it stays, together with a fantastic energy return. This improves the horse's confidence and its performance. In the equestrian world, many records have been broken on our surfaces as a result, and the number of injuries dramatically reduced. In the global arena of racing, Martin Collins, with Polytrack, was the innovator for wax-coated synthetic surfaces, which have subsequently thrived, first for gallops and then for racing itself. With an ever-growing demand for synthetic surfaces, the smart money is on Martin Collins.
No, Martin, but it is actually. The other thing that's going to happen is that the track will drive significant other investment, including on-course barns. Up to 6 are planned, and the first 2 are already planned on site, and that's the location down by the Mile Chute. Barns are stylish, but practical, and they'll all be of a similar template, so we have consistency on course. Make this a world-class racing and training centre. They're also flexible, so they're split so they can be a 24-horse barn or a 12-horse barn. And the beauty of that is that with Cedar, once we get the track in, I want to go on a marketing campaign to actually target trainers around this country, relocate to the Manawatu and to Palmerston North. That gives the opportunity for a young trainer to come in with 12 horses and expand to 20 horses. I'm proud to say that I installed one of these tracks at Caulfield Racecourse in Melbourne during my time there. And I thought I'll leave you, Tangi, with comments from the top 3 trainers at Caulfield.
We've been through a very, very cold, wet winter, and a bit of heat, and it's made no difference to the track. We think it's the best synthetic track we've ever seen.
When you're going pace work and you're slightly softer working gallops, the Poly provides what's been the ultimate surface.
I think it's perfect. I think it's the best track ever for horses to gallop on.
We don't want anyone to know, really. We're trying to keep it for ourselves.
Just 2 questions about the fundraising. How do you think about
the $3 million that we have to contribute is a pro rata sum, and so if it's 13.5 million, it's 3 million. If it's 12 million, it's going to be 2 point something. So there is a skin in the game commitment that the PGF require. Our funding has always been, and I've always been consistent, linked to the successful rezoning of Kiki Whenua. What that will do is open a development facility that I've always discussed with the bank. The 2 are intertwined and can't be separated. So basically, there's an appeal underway at the moment. I'm hopeful that will be successful. In that event, then that will release.
questions around the synthetic tracks in Australia? Some clubs are going against.
Not my experience in Australia. They're very popular, growing. Ballarat is just a very large one right now. Warwick Farm is Rosehill. Warwick Farm's got one, and Rosehill are currently in construction of the track. There have been 3 types of track in the evolution of them. There's Capita, Pro-Ride, and Polytrack. Over time, Polytrack has been proved to be the best and the safest. In Australia, they're very popular. There is a difference, however, in the United States. The United States went over to synthetic surfaces, all three of them, some time ago because they had a catastrophic injury rate on the dirt racing. And they have actually decided to go back to dirt. It's nothing to do with the tracks. It's purely, I hate to say it, the old boys network, like in the traditionalists not wanting to change. I mean, it might be interesting to know the safety component. It's quite staggering. The F1 injury database is operating for 15 years in the United States. And their figures in terms of injuries per 1,000 horses on dirt is 1.95, on turf 1.8, and on synthetic 1.18. And the beauty of that is that synthetic is all of those types and the evolution over 15 years, where polytrack would be down about 0.5 per 1,000. When you then multiply it out by the number of starters and horses, talking of a reduction in injury rates in the hundreds of thousands.
Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Al. And following on from your comments there, my question was about the animal welfare aspects of the track, synthetic track. So you now about the reduction in injuries. What about long term in terms of wear and tear on that type of thing? Is there any advantage to them running on a synthetic track?
Yeah, there's been a lot of research done both in the UK and the States. What they've done is they've done a lot of work with amazingly engineered shoes, and they have actually computers inside them, and they have been proved to be significantly better at software. They're clearly both safe for them. The other point, Councillor Johnson, is that it's not just in terms of racing as well, but it's about training. So what you're getting here and why those full field trainers are so positive, that you're not getting a horse having to go through wet ground at one point and dry ground at another, and that's one of the biggest issues.
Councillor Primus.
It's really great to see this technology coming to the Manawatu. I'm interested, what is the lifespan of polytrack?
Pretty much haven't found the bottom of it. So we're looking at tracks now about 15 years old. What does happen though is that there's maintenance program that's like all surfaces. So I'll accrue an amount every year for it. Basically what that does is every 3 years there's a binder added to it to replenish it. Every 3 years you may need to flip the track, they call it, in simple reasons, about 7 inches deep, and the polymer migrates to gravity. So at a point in time, the rotavator won't be doing enough, so you actually pick it up, buy the bitumen, pick it up, turn it over, and rotovate it again. They leave behind a huge stockpile of material when they do it. I did the one at Caulfield. It's now 9 years old and has never been flipped, never been popped up. So but it's only used for training. Mornington is an enormous track. You watch the races from Mornington, polytrack there, and because of the amount of racing, that's getting flipped every 3 years and getting binder and pop up every year. But in terms of its longevity, they haven't got.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Al, for the update. Just wanted to know what the synthetic materials are.
So they're a silicate type sand. It's got to be a very specific sand, not beach sand. I know nothing more than that as a term. It is carpet fibre, so reused recycled carpet fibre, and reused recycled rubber. That's it. With the polymer then binding it together. All the material done at the point of origin.
So with the, I guess what I'm trying to get to is understand how much the plastic, the carpet fibers are plastic?
No.
Nylon?
I don't believe so. I've never actually checked in on that. But all I can tell you is a combination of sand, carpet fibers, and rubber. And last two are recycled.
So I guess you don't know, or I take from that you don't know if the carpet fibers are willing plastic carpet.
Look, I'd have to guess that plastic carpet, woolen carpet is probably the better answer because 90% of carpets in the world now are not wool. So in terms of any negative protection there might be there, the fact that we actually use those carpets and recycle them.
So I suppose that where I'd go next would just be to understand what the experience been in Australia and what's planned locally here in terms of keeping the plastic on the track and not harm.
The entire area of Polytrack is right with it's quarantined, I suppose. The reason being is that you don't want Polytrack going off the track, but you don't want contamination and dirt and other things going on to the track. So what is done is that there's a significant contamination apron when you go onto a track and when you come off the track. And in that respect, there's no migration really at all. It's also, remember, it's also black polymer bound. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't blow. Paul and I were in Cambridge the last 2 days and looking at their construction. We raised the concern that we get strong winds in the Manawatu. Such a race meaning our sand blows off the curve. And the manufacturer said, well, it simply won't be a problem because it blows strong enough to go on Polytrack, it will blow off. It won't stay. Polytrack doesn't go anywhere. If I had some here, I'd love to show you, but it is literally a strong cotton wool. The only way to describe it. It doesn't move around. It's not like sand. It is bound.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Thanks, Al, for the presentation. We don't seem to be great opportunity for you to come and update us on progress. I will look to move the recommendation, receive the presentation for information. That'll be my in doing so, just to reiterate that I guess our race have never been a stranger to this, and it's a good opportunity to update on progress. The racing industry is going through a little bit of a reset at the moment, and so this synthetic track is going to be a significant game changer for racing in the districts, and it's our tuning. It's great also that Linda from CEDA is here, because having a race flag that they want to explore opportunities to track that training capacity region is something that I think would be important. Any other comments?
Waving from the end of the room. I just wanted to comment on the improved animal welfare outcomes that are going to be the result of this track, because I think obviously we're in economic development, we're focusing on the advantages economically to the city, but there are people that have some reservations about horse racing, and I think being able to explain that this is a positive step in terms of welfare for horses, fewer injuries, is something that shouldn't also be missed on the going story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just to acknowledge what we heard about the composition of the track and its likelihood of staying in place, and look forward to never discovering it anywhere other than on the track, and thank Mr. Robertson for those assurances.
Councillor Harper.
I also think that racing for you, the trainers will really appreciate it. It's not because the track will be able to be used. I think that's a really good thing. That's what's going to be an outcome. Racing. Well done. Now the security, I know you had to do it done for each district.
Thank you. Those in favour? So item number 6, which is a presentation from Manawatu Chamber Nurse. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having Chamber here today. So if you'll all just please indulge me a little bit, I just thought we haven't spoken at the Economic Development Committee since September last year. So I just thought I'd give a very quick update on the Chamber and an overview for some of the councillors who haven't heard from the Chamber before. So, oh, that's very small, isn't it? So we're an independent member-funded organisation, we're an incorporated society, as are all of the chambers across the country. We're funded by our members through subscriptions and through sponsorship. We're one of 31 chambers across the country. We make up 24,000 businesses altogether across NZCC Inc. There's been a chamber here since 1880. We've got a board of 11 who meet monthly and an advisory board of 15, and we meet quarterly. And that's made up of CEOs and senior management across our businesses right across the region. So we represent a large proportion of businesses and SMEs and not-for-profits, universities, education, defence, etc. So we represent a large part of the region's GDP, and if you push that out further, the number of employees around the region are part of the Chamber's makeup. And we are a small agile team. We make there's 3 FDEs. 2 of them are here today, so I'd actually really like to acknowledge my team, Leanne Anderson and Tracy Sefton-Wiggins, for the work that they've been doing. So we've had them, a few part-time staff, and Young Chamber. I've got his problem as well. Okay, so what do we do? What's our business as usual? So we advocate for the business community, both at a central government and local government level. Business support, whatever that looks like, and we all know from recent months that can be a lot of different things. But it's all the things that businesses need to make sure that they can operate in the best possible climate for themselves and for the region. We do training and development. It's still not working. So training and development, so lunch and learn, that sort of thing. And also we have a whole range of other events, from networking, business after fives. Last year we had 28 business after fives. We have some flagship events such as our Dinner of Provenance, B2B Expo, economic updates, budget lunches with the Minister of Finance, speakers, directories, member to member, national benefits, Young Chamber, and we're looking for a sponsor for Young Chamber, so can get that message going out, that'd be great, thank you. And with Young Chamber, they're providing the link between the youth and the business community. We also manage a number of clusters through the region, the Manawatu Defence Hub and the Contact Centre Cluster. We meet regularly with them, and we contract a couple of other things, including the Business Mentors NZ, which we're currently subcontracting from CEDA, working on the Business Improvement District with Council, and we are the export documentation stampers for certificates of origin for our region. So, what have we been doing in the last couple of months in regards to our support of the business community on COVID-19? We've been supporting our businesses, calling all of our members, keeping people connected, and we've had over 600 business interactions in the last 6 weeks. We've been answering calls, people have been asking for a lot of clarity. There was a lot of fear in the early days, so we've been responding to the immediate needs of the business community. From that, we set up a Manawatu Business Support Group, which was a Facebook group for members and non-members alike, and we became one of the go-to places during that time. We set up a Business Leaders Forum, which was a weekly online Zoom meeting. So we were able to connect and inform, and we were able to, through that, give feedback to both the local and central government as well. We had regular meetings, and just to acknowledge and thank Mayor Grant Smith for his weekly appearance on that, along with Mayor Helen Smith, with Mayor Helen Warboys in Scullaway and others from the other stakeholders across the region. We've also been working on the Business Mentors programme, and we moved one member of staff full-time into that level of support. We had a very high match rate during the the 6 weeks of the lockdown and then there and after. We've actually matched 73 as of the end of last week. We've got another now 9 in process. So that's actually been huge. And again, we acknowledge the mentors and that there's been a huge step up from our mentors to be able to provide that level of support. And then indeed, we've had other people come on board and we're still looking for more mentors. So that's been really significant. And overall, we're up over 100 mentor matches so far in the year to date. So we've ensured that the money that's been available, or in the case of with the NZT funding of the business mentors, it did become no charge during the COVID-19, and that's just come back on. But hopefully, we've been able to ensure that the region has been able to benefit from that NZT funding through to our businesses. We've also been running webinars, as I think everybody else has, and we've been promoting not just ours, but other people's webinars as well. We thought that our position is very much one of a connector, so we want to make sure that everybody else's information as well is passed out and gets to as many people as possible. And we've run our own business after fives as virtual after fives, where you have to BYO and BYO ownables as well. But we're hoping that we're doing the last one tonight, and the next one we do, we will all be back in face to face, and we're really, really looking forward to that. As I said before, the connections are really important to us. Making sure that people who needed advice got it. Work closely with CEDA's business growth advisors, making sure that as well that we were supporting that and that the survey was going out to as many people as possible that CEDA worked on. I know you're hearing from Linda straight afterwards, so she'll be giving you some more updates on that. And here's the next one. Finally, we've been working in collaboration with a whole group of organisations on the Choose Manawatu Buy Local, Shop Local campaign. We thought it was really, really important that as soon as possible, as soon as we were starting to go through to the recovery, that we made sure that we were able to stimulate the local economy. So we're working with that, with CEDA, with Field and District Promotion, PNCC, MDC, Palmy Bid, and the 6 of us have worked really, really closely together on that. And it was great that we could move so quickly. And we were able to make decisions at one meeting and move them forward and execute it and have it ready for the next meeting. And also to acknowledge their young chamber for they've been doing all the data input on that. So they've been part of that journey. And so the future, well, we're obviously, hopefully, well into the recovery, and we'll continue to be there to support the business community, navigating the challenges, working with others, building capability, and connecting businesses. We will get back to our business as usual. We'll carry on doing those things to make sure that the business community has a collective voice. We do see some opportunities, although we acknowledge the hardship that some of the businesses, and we're not out of the woods yet, as it was said yesterday. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We acknowledge that, but we do feel that Manawatu went into this better place than many other regions, that the business community have come out very unified over the last few weeks. We will continue to collaborate. We'll work on the Choose Manawatu with the bid projects with CEDA, Environmental Network Manawatu, Network of Skilled Migrants, etc. We sit on a number of advisory board meetings. So we will be there to make sure that the business community's voice is heard. So now and into the future, the Chamber is committed to getting the business community back on their feet. Recovery and rebuilding will be achieved by working together to build better and stronger businesses in the city and the Manawatu. And I'd just like to acknowledge our sponsors as well. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. And also move physical location too.
We moved after, I think the Chamber has not had its own front door for about 20 years. On the 2nd of March, we moved into our own. We had 2 weeks or so there. So we're now in Northcote Business Park. Very welcome. We've got much more space than our small room that we had before the Grand. So yes, we have. Amanda.
Thank you for
Yes, it's probably quite a small amount, probably around 10%. We did have a look at that, yeah. But we do work closely with other groups such as Te Pakahi, and yeah, it's a mixture. Young Chambers for 18 to 24-year-olds, and how we started it, we actually started it through the intern program. So the intern that we had in 2017, we worked with her and another young person, but it is a complete mixture. So we have the sort of the lead operator tends to either be our intern or our past intern. The year they turn into past intern, they actually are employed by us for up to 6-7 hours a week. But then we have a board, and that board, there are people on that board that do run their own businesses. So again, they're sort of the 24. We're not that strict on it. We don't sort of push their birthdays, but they could be anything. They could be students. They could be running their own business. They could be employees. So yeah, just it's really great having their input into us, and we've learned so much from them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Nice to see you.
Business advisory.
Do you mean my advisory board or the Facebook advisory group?
No.
So the advisory board, it's that general feedback that we get from them. We talk to our advisory board, quarterly, but there's that constant touch point with them. And it's very much a round table type meetings, like what is actually happening in our community. Give us your feedback. Are we doing what you want us to do? And because the organisations that they're involved with, they have lots of touch points as well. So it's just another way that we can communicate through the business. And most of them are our sponsors as well. And in terms of sponsors, it's quite altruistic in some ways what some of them do for us. They're there for the good of the business community, not necessarily what might be defined as a sponsorship relationship. But they're highly important to Chamber, absolutely critical.
I ask a question you don't have to answer. How have they been coping with?
I think the same as everybody else really. And what we've seen is the resilience in the business community, the way that people, I've heard the word pivot, but I'd say the way that they've looked at the challenges and they've seen their way through. How can we do things differently? What else can we do? What do we need to call on? So it's just seeing the resilience of the business community. And we've got the likes of Mass here on our advisory board, and obviously they and UCOL, Massey were better set up to be able to go to online learning because they did a lot of it anyway. But UCOL very quickly had to catch up, and it was just seeing how those changes, how people cope with that, which was really good to see. It's really heartening actually. It's quite humbling as well, some of the things that we've seen and heard from the business community.
Thank you, man. I just want to acknowledge your own stats of in excess of 600 contact local businesses over 6 years. And I know that you've been very, very busy, and I know people around this table have also started to do from time to time. So thank you for what you, your staff and your organisation do. And I also know that you played a leadership role with BID.
Thank you, everyone.
Right, well, I'll move the recommendation on the screen after, which is the presentation from the Chamber.
Here, just want to acknowledge Amanda and Franklin. It's nice to see you in person. Amanda, I've only seen you on the screen. Vehicle showed us trees behind. Some business. Pretty lonely out there.
those in favour? Move to item number 7, which is a presentation from Peter Stewart, the Chief Executive, no stranger to this committee. I understand you have presentation.
Kia ora tātou, everyone. It's nice to see everybody physically for a change, I have to say, rather a Zooey, as we seem to call them now. Thank you for the opportunity. I did submit a fairly full written report, and I'll take that as read, but just wanted to take the time to add a bit more context and maybe a little bit more colour with some of the examples of the initiatives that we've had underway. Happy to answer questions at the end. Start on that. Getting double. So just a little bit of context to how we framed up our initial response programme. And the considerations really broke down what we were doing into 3 key parts, keep it simple. So looking at the lockdown, the transition and the new normal. This will not be news to you. You've all been living and breathing it even more so than I am sure. So I'll not labour on this slide, but simply to say that we are very positive about the future for our city. And we do believe that there are many opportunities ahead of us as a city, not just focusing on the very well documented and laboured on risks I think we're all aware of right now. We really had to understand the global environment as well as the national environment that our city is facing in the response and recovery. For us, taking that wider context and then drilling it down to what does this mean for our city and our region, and getting really granular on the likely scenarios that our people and our community were facing. We got organised in the second week of March, with our first major decision as a result of this being to cancel New Zealand or postpone New Zealand Agri-Food Week. And that was the first decision of many for all of us that was particularly complex at the time. Our primary focus after Agri-Food Week was essentially to support businesses and protect jobs. It was as simple as that for us. We had to distill a huge amount of information that was coming through and make sense of it as quickly as possible. Our priority was to make access to that information as straightforward and as easy as possible for our business community and ensure that it was relevant. If your inbox was like mine, there was a lot of noise and a lot of information flying. We focus particularly on identifying our high-risk sectors and businesses, and as well identifying what we believe their major pain points would be, which helps us to target our resources that we have to hand. All of our work has been guided by what we were aiming to achieve or come out of the other side. And I would note that these are not necessarily just driver data, and nor would we be necessarily leading all of those. Some of our role is to support other entities or to be aware of. But this is what we framed our response and recovery around. Big slide, lots of info, but the main thing on here for us, and we're still very much in this resilience stage, is triaging the businesses and doing it swiftly as they contact us. We have to ensure that we use our resources and target them effectively
where they're going to provide the biggest impact for those that have the greatest need. The main thing that the business community have said is, can you make this as easy and as quick as possible for us? And that was the other framing that we had internally within CEDA, is that we had to be as responsive and as agile in how we approach this situation as we possibly could be. And what does that mean? Having twice weekly sprint meetings and essentially reviewing everything that we were doing within, 15-minute stand-up meeting, and choosing to make changes rapidly as a result of the feedback from our business community, adapting the information, the comms, the way in which we approached and applied our resources. Most of this was done from the real-time data, so our feedback from our community. I was told by somebody much more experienced than me, is that the best people to ask are the ones that are actually experiencing it. That very much was the basis for how we framed our response work. A key part was our COVID response hub to support businesses. This was a whole new section on the CEDA website, and it was stood up within 48 hours by the team. It is still refined and updated on a daily basis to make sure that it carries the most up-to-date information. And it is our primary channel for businesses contacting us and getting information out to businesses. For a bit of context on just how busy the team has been over the past 8 weeks, we've supported over 300 businesses with in-depth business support over the past 8 weeks. Almost half of those businesses are in Palmerston North. Put that into perspective, that's the same as our annual target that we usually do in 12 months, and we've done it in 8 weeks. In total, year to date, we've provided support to over 600 businesses across the region. So the team are not able to be here today as they're all very busy, but just a shout out to every one of them that's worked really hard. And also as well, a shout out to the Chamber, who have done an exceptional job in managing the Business Mentors New Zealand programme for us. Another key area of focus, I talk a lot about the real-time data, so ground up as well as the top-down information from the likes of Peter Crawford at Palmerston North City Council and Stacey Bell at Manawatu District Council. This is what we have been basing our response on. We gather this information from our surveys of businesses, from our business engagements out in the field, as well as having access to TradeMe data, Chorus data, Market View data as well. This dashboard is available on the CEDA.nz website. It's updated weekly with all of the stats that we gather, and it can be filtered by city, district, as well as the overall Manawatu region. It's certainly been webinar season. I'm sure everybody's been feeling a bit webinared out. We've been playing a role in doing that, but it's been a huge success and a huge channel of support for our business community. The topics that have been selected have been chosen by our businesses. So they've been the ones that have been telling us the information that they need and that they want access to. They've also been sector specific as well. You can see, I think there's one on there that was particularly for the visitor sector in demystifying Qualmark. And the types of information that the businesses have been seeking has evolved rapidly over the course of the crisis, from continuity planning right through to now, really thinking about the efficiencies through lean practices to blasting recessions with the use of technology. So the businesses are now looking forward rather than looking down at their feet. We've also been really, really proud to be able to leverage Te Aho Tāmaka and having the Embracing Change webinar series. These are our most distinguished alumni from the city and the district, and they've been very keen to give back with their experience to your community. They've included Linda Jenkinson, Farah Palmer, Robin Stalker, we've got Steve Mahari and Simon Mutter coming up over the next couple of weeks. And all of those websites have been at capacity. I think a couple have been subscribed and on wait lists. going to see this one a lot. I hope everybody's updated their Facebook profile to have the Choose Manawa 2 around your profile photo and having it on the banner in the background. This has been a truly collaborative effort right across the region, from the Chamber, the City Council, District Council, Fielding and District Promotions and CEDA. We have 267 businesses now listed. 211 of them are based within the city. And interestingly, the highest number within a category is within the trades and professional services. I would note that an interesting fact that's coming through in our survey is that only half of the businesses within the city and within the region, that stat holds pretty firm, have their own website. So there is very limited digital presence by a lot of our business community, and only half of those, again, so 25%, have e-commerce capability. So this type of platform is proving invaluable for those businesses, but longer term, it signals that we need to provide greater support to our business community in upskilling them in their digital and in their online marketing and capabilities. Lastly, just a little bit of insight into what we're doing at the same time as still the response work, but what does the future look like? We'll see this coming through, and it's touched on in our draft statement of intent, which you'll be reviewing shortly. The only thing I'd like to add beyond the high-level bullet points that are on here is that the recovery period is going to be full of opportunities, but it's also going to be really competitive for us as a region. Competitive in terms of jobs for those that are impacted through the crisis. It will also be competitive to attract talent to our region versus others, for visitation, for conferences, and for events. The big metros will be driving hard, and they'll be wanting more than their fair share. So we have a question to consider in just how proactive as a city we want to be, and dare I say, just how aggressive we want to be in getting our share and keeping the share that we currently have. And just a note, it's really important in the landscape that we're all operating on to keep across the regulatory and policy changes that are coming through. And it's something that we're continually working with our partners to ensure that we're up to speed with, and reviewing what the impact of any changes to the myriad of policies that are out there are the impact that they're going to have on our plans and activities within the city. It's very, very important that we understand changes to things like the PGF, all the way through to the change in the domestic strategy and approach by Tourism New Zealand, and everything in between. And very lastly, just like to say a huge thanks to the team at Palmerston North City Council, elected members, but in particular a lot of the staff who have provided unwavering support through their own response and recovery planning. It's been a really great collaborative effort right across the city.
Question from Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Linda. My question is about the businesses you helped during this period. This report says that total number of businesses, and then the money spent for $241,000. And in your oral report, you have said you have helped about 600 businesses. I guess, other than these businesses which are in Palmerston North or somewhere outside, can you please tell me on what this money was spent? And number two, if this money, I mean, $241,000 was spent on 134 businesses, total amount, what was the total amount that you spent on 600 businesses?
Sure, thank you for your question. Keep the 600 separate from the 134. So the 134 is a reflection of the 300 businesses that we've helped in the 8-week period. The 600 is over year to date. The 241 is correct to the time of writing at the 15th, but I think it's just clipped up towards the 300,000 now since the report was written. This is through the Regional Business Partner Programme, so that fund comes directly from central government. The total fund that we have provided through right across the Manawatu Wanganui region is over 600,000. So you'll see that there's a bit of a trend there that Palmerston North gets around 50%, which is reflective of the business and economic structure across the region. How the programme works is when a business contacts us or we contact them, we work with them through essentially an open discussion, a confidential discussion to understand the challenges that their business is specifically facing due to COVID. That's ranged in everything from marketing and comms to health and safety to HR to strategy, continuity planning. When we work with them to understand exactly what they've got in place and what the gaps are or what their challenges are, we can then match them with a service provider or let's say a specific set of expertise that can help them to overcome those challenges. And that fund is used to pay for that expertise. So the fund goes to accessing them the support that they need to help them through those challenges. And it can range from an investment of $500 to few $1,000 depending on the expertise required.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Linda, for coming in today. I just wanted to follow up on the thing you described as triaging the businesses. And I wondered if you could tell us what that means to those businesses and what would have happened to those businesses if you hadn't been able.
Sure. Triaging, we will get an inquiry from the business community in a number of different ways. They can be referred by, say, their bank or their accountant. They can contact us via the website or 0800 number, or they may have an existing relationship with us. We work quickly in that initial assessment with them to understand how we can best help them. For some, it's being able to provide them with swift answer to a question around their eligibility for an MSD wage subsidy and get them in contact with the right person that can help them with their application, right through to, no, we need to work with you on a one-on-one basis. Let's explore this further. We try and do that as quickly as possible so that, you know, they're not delayed any further. Most of these businesses, especially in the first 3 weeks, were either highly emotional or pretty angry, I might add. So we needed to make sure that it was done quickly and effectively. We also, too, had to assess, are we the best people to help them? If they've got particular issues around their financial situation, it might be better to refer them straight back to their bank and follow up with them thereafter to make sure they have what they need. So it's being pretty clinical about what we can and can't do and who isn't best to help them.
So just the last part of that, what would have happened if you weren't?
Well, what we see now is businesses that have been unsure of what to do, have gone around the houses, so to speak, who have taken longer than would be optimal to address some of the issues that they're facing. I think many would be able to eventually find it, but for some, it's been a painful, 6 or 8 weeks. Whereas for others who have got in touch early on, I'm not saying that, we helped or saved everybody, but it's finding the right support quickly for them. And it's just cut down the pain for many. We're proactively now calling out to businesses within highly affected sectors that we haven't heard from, see how they're going and if they're, in a positive space or if they're one of the ones that have been in a tailspin.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Linda, for the update and the extraordinary work you've done. A couple of things I wanted to follow up on. One, data, and it's great to see that it's sort of available in nearly real time. I mean, seeing weekly bites of that's really great. Is that going to continue? Is that likely to just?
The data that we gather from our one-on-one engagements with businesses, we are committed to continuing, and we're probably looking to review it again at the end of this calendar year. The survey information that augments it, we will be carrying another one out when we do move down to level 1 because it's been in sequence with the movements between levels. But whether we do another one thereafter, we've yet to decide. We have access to the TradeMe data to the end of the year and the market view data. I know that the city and district are also looking at. We get a regional view, but at the moment we've been accessing a city and a district view as well. But it will depend, in all honesty, on costs term for that.
Great, thanks for that information. First one is just, I guess, hearing a portion of local businesses that didn't have a digital profile, potentially, a pathway that could transform that. You see a way through to us actually having quite a high proportion, and what's needed to.
We were surprised as well, but we've done some further work around the rest of New Zealand, and we're not much better or much worse than many other regions in New Zealand, if there's any solace in that. I think that Choose Manawatu will provide a springboard and stimulate the thinking of many of these businesses as to why a digital footprint is so necessary in today's day and age. But we need to get through, steadying the ship, so to speak, and coming out the other side before I think it would be worthwhile, and hopefully in partnership with, say, the Chamber and Fielding and District Promotions, to look at targeted capability development in this area. If we get into the digital presence on the social media channels, it drops down even further right across the board. So there's a definite need. And I think the need has become much more acute for the businesses now, whereas before it was perhaps dismissed as a luxury.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Linda. Like Kanda, thanks for all the work. Talking about the visitor sector. In the develop the coastal arts trail.
That's been in development pre-COVID, if everybody can remember such a time. We've collaborated through, we have an international marketing alliance with Taranaki, Wanganui and Manawatu, and we were looking to more formalize particular product and travel route offerings that makes the most of what each of those 3 regions has to offer. So the Coastal Art Trails takes in our cultural and our arts facilities across each of those regions, much the same way in, say, what we've done with the Country Road in identifying the key product. So theatres, art galleries that each region has, and profiling those and related businesses, so that people that are touring New Zealand and have got a particular interest in arts and culture can take a more self-guided tour around the western coast of the North Island. So that's gaining momentum back and gaining quite a bit of interest from our motorhome associations and the NZ caravanners.
Just on tourism. But is it really around trying to swap some realistic Wellington? Yeah.
Yeah, you're 100% spot on. Wellington is our biggest market for domestic visitation, but I do firmly believe that we can be doing more and encouraging them to stay and to spend longer. So we are looking at what we can do directly with Wellington, but also swapping populations with, say, Hamilton, with Taranaki as well. There are opportunities and things that our region has that others don't. So we've got to be quite targeted in how we do it. and really quite selective about what our value proposition is. But I think you're 100% right. There's much for these specific visitor markets to see here that they don't have access to, particularly Wellington.
Thinking just that little bit longer term with the possible Trans-Tasman bubble. Just know that virtual Queenstown is teaming up with Wellington, possibly our western neighbour. In and out of Wellington, but
yeah, great suggestion as well. We have, the people above and below us get quite a fair share of their international and visitor spend. By that I mean to Ruapehu and then to Wellington. For internationals, that leaves a 4-hour gap with nothing to do. But lo and behold, we're right in the middle. So if we can tag team with our northern counterparts and also with our southern counterparts, particularly around our walks, hikes, our nature environment, conservation and culture experience to break that journey up, it will provide our inbound operators and those that want to sell these tours with something that they don't already have. So it's a very good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Linda. Just my question relates to the international education commentary that you have in your document there around the figures, and just interested in saying Massey's really solid at roughly 75%. Still must have an impact on their situation. But I'm just understanding too that that next paragraph you're mentioning the need for securing work, and yet I'm also mindful of unemployment rates and international needing to have some sort of point criteria to be eligible for jobs, for say, and that if a role, as I understand it, still could be taken with a New Zealander, then they are at a weaker point position there too. So I just want to get a further pushing in. Do you see that being realistic to, I see that as being quite a challenged situation. Ask for further comment.
Very astute. Yes, it is a challenging situation. The labour market is going to become more and more complex. With international students, they do have some parameters around their visas and what they can actually do for work and how aligned it is with what they're studying. They've been relaxed at the moment, but I would expect them to come back on board. And also the minimum wage that they can work for or their salary as well to be eligible. So I don't see that it would have a direct impact on where, our, and Peter will get into this later on, our job seeker numbers are not as highly impacted as many other cities and regions across New Zealand. That's not to dismiss those that are affected currently, but we are seeing them at this stage more at the lower end, the 18 to 34, particularly Maori Pacifica, and particularly at the lower skilled end. So there might not be direct competition if Immigration New Zealand reinstates the set criteria around student visas for internationals. Where I think we will find the issue is actually in finding employers that are willing to take on more individuals. At this stage, we see businesses being slower to recruit, slower to make decisions, slower to invest. And I think that's probably where we're going to find the greatest pinch point. The one thing that I would say, though, is that with our larger organisations here in the region, like Fonterra, FMG, DKSH, the universities themselves, they're well accustomed to what's required to support our international students. So I think maybe we just need to be a little bit innovative and lateral in our thinking and how we can support them. They're a huge and important part of our economy and what they bring. So we need to wrap our around them, particularly for semester 2, when I think it's really going to bite in terms of our international numbers. It'll be hard.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Linda. I just wanted to ask about, I noted on your slide that you pointed out that only 20% of the fixed costs for a lot of SMEs are the wages and 80% is other fixed costs, including rent. And I've had feedback from a couple of small businesses locally that they have really struggled to negotiate any kind of rent reduction from their business landlord. And I wonder if you had a feel for how things are going in that area. Are landlords generally offering concessions, or are businesses being put under pressure to pay rent as normal? And if there's not much concession happening, how can we work on that?
It's been a mixed bag, would be the short answer. Some landlords have been very good, some have been good, some have costs incurred and have not been as generous. Would be the short one on that. I have noted that some that have been providing deferred payment or subsidising it themselves are beginning to remove that now, now that businesses' doors are opened. How we've approached it, we have limited levers here ourselves, but it's really in being quite clear around what are the fixed costs for the businesses that can be pared back where possible. If a reduction or deferring on their rent is not an option for whatever reason, what else can we be doing? Most of those conversations have been encouraged to be had directly with their banks and financial institutions, and the government's support in terms of the finance and loans has helped considerably for that. Trying to encourage the private sector for some of these when they have issues to deal with.
Best not to say anymore. Thank you.
Councillor Dingle.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. You touched on page 16, labour market, the fact that Māori 18 to have been, I guess, businesses that you're supporting at the moment. How many of those are Māori?
Very small number. So at the moment, right across the Manawatu Wanganui region, I think we're at about 28. That's across the whole region. We've been working with NZTE, TPK, Patama Trust, Te Ao Pākehī, Te Mana Atatu to understand why that is. And it's reflected right across New Zealand that the access by Māori businesses in particular for support via the Regional Business Partner Programme has been very, very low. Patama Trust had their own $1 million fund, and the uptake of that has been very, very low as well. So it seems to be quite a complex and complicated issue. We did deploy our Māori liaison manager, Hayden Potaka, into a business support role this time. And he's been out actively speaking with businesses. There seems to be one lack of awareness that we're trying to understand as to what support is available, but also to a reluctance to step into and to take that support up, believing that many others will be more impacted than they are. So there are some clear differences in the drivers to access that support. But I do know that there's a couple of papers going up to government by MV and NZTE. There's businesses out there, Māori businesses, that are not being supported as effectively as they could, and we need to, as New Zealand, look at a better way of doing that. So it's not a great picture. I can't dress that one up.
And thank you for your honest response. And I have one more question, if I may. So also on that page, you said that you have partnered with MSD regional team to match businesses that are making employees redundant, those that are actively seeking employees. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on how that's going, and I mean, whether they're sort of the same businesses in the same industries or size businesses, how that whole thing works.
That was one of the first things that was stood up in the early stages, that we were getting businesses saying, we don't want to make our people redundant. Are there other entities that can use these skills? MSD had the same inquiries, and it started off with a very basic spreadsheet between both parties, and this was happening across New Zealand. One sheet saying what the businesses were and what the skills and the numbers were that were potentially being made redundant. And on the next sheet was those businesses that were looking for skills. It's now, taken on a whole life of its own, and MSD have produced an app and a website that profiles both the opportunities but also advertises for skills that are required, which is an excellent resource. And it also as well kind of reduces some of the myths or the perception barriers about how you might access opportunities via MSD and working income. The industries that we've been looking to make people redundant or have would be of no surprise: accommodation, professional services, retail, hospitality. We have had quite a few actually within the labouring sector, so trades have been affected as well. The businesses and manufacturing, the businesses that have been actively looking are, again, no surprises: aged care, residential care, health, security, horticulture, and the primary sector. There's another one that I can't right now. But no surprises there on those that have been able to maintain quite consistently their work and actually increasing their workload during the crisis.
Thank you. Councillor Hubb.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just about the sort of expo and it going digital. And it is our flagship. How do you think it's going? And is it a platform that can be a hit and run? Something that we want to be successful. What you got here?
We've been overwhelmed, actually, is how I'd sum it up, the talent and skills team. We did make the decision to move the whole event online, and we thought now's the time to give it a crack and to innovate ourselves and take a bit of our own advice. We've been building the aeroplane while we've been flying that one, and it launched last week on Monday. We set ourselves the target of having 10 careers webinars from the 25th through to the May through to the 19th of June. And all of those webinars are run by a training provider or education institution. They're partnered with a business that also speaks, and then they also have an employee. So you get it from the individual perspective, the business perspective, and the education perspective. The uptake's been so overwhelming that instead of 10, we have over 30 now that are running. Some of them are 2 per day. So it's caught us, in all honesty, a little bit by surprise as to just how successful the uptake's been. Where we've seen a bit of a switch is the number of businesses that have wanted to engage in online versus in a physical environment. They've been quite different businesses, and some have been slow to take it up until they've essentially seen how it works and have then come on board. Others have decided not to. They're not in the right headspace, and we completely respect that. How it's tracking, maybe let you know at the end of this week once we see what the uptake has been in the webinars and the feedback. But initial feel is that it's gone, I would say, surprisingly well, but the team have done a very good job.
Are we still targeting our central district audience up further to
all of our marketing, comms, advertising is based in region, but because it's online, we're having participation from right across New Zealand. Yeah, so which will stand us in good stead, I think. And the other part is that it has really opened it up beyond school leavers. So we've really opened it for international students, for those that have been impacted through this process, to return to work, to older workers or those that are looking to change jobs. So it's opened the whole event up considerably from where it's been previously.
Thank you. That concludes questions. So thank you, Linda, and thanks for the city-centric report on CEDA's activities during the COVID period of late, and that's obviously been in the order paper. I will move the recommendation, which is that we receive the presentation and the report information, seconded by Councillor. Anyone want to speak? Yeah.
Only fair that we give a shout out to CEDA as well. Just want to acknowledge what your team's done, Linda. I think again, really, really important that day that's on the ground working for challenging time. I think there is some opportunities, as Linda said, the way people work, digital side, Zooming meetings, Zooey meetings, yeah. We're becoming experts at that now ourselves. But I do think there's some opportunities around stick swapping the populations, the Trans-Tasman bubble, and our neighbours, and other opportunities that fall out of COVID.
There being no further comments, I will now that against carry. Move to our next item, which is item number 8, the confirmation of the minutes. I will move the confirmation of Councillor Harper matters arising as to their correctness. Yes, Councillor Dingwall.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just had a question on that. Can I?
Depends what it is.
So in the minutes, it was. Yeah, well, I'll ask it. In the minutes on page 26, it was saying that the C to undertake financial modelling back to May finance and audit. So obviously, COVID happened, but I guess I'm just wondering there what the changes there and whether it, yeah, what happened there.
Okay, so that was a decision that this committee made to effectively audit to finance and audit. So it's an issue that will need to be taken up with the chair of finance and audit outside of this meeting, because the decision is to send it somewhere else, not for us to continue.
Thank you.
Any other issues? If not, I ask that they be confirmed. Those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? If not, then that is carried. Move to item number 9, which is the 3 reports. And we've got Peter Crawford and Linda Stewart. Join us at the table, please. The particular reports will be slightly different from what has previously been presented and submitted, so there will be a very brief presentation in advance of.
Kia ora, koutou councillors. So just one graph on the last quarter, GDP trends. That peak in 2018 relates to the very strong growth we had in building consents in the first half of 2018. And even though, of course, activity has slowed a little bit with some of those projects coming to an end, we've largely matched the downturn in economic activity as the national trend. Range of indicators we actually put on the council's online dashboard. One of the key ones is some monthly data that MSD is now publishing for job seeker numbers. You can see the black line. New Zealand was trending up through the last 12 months, and then of course some very strong growth for April. We haven't got the May data yet, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks. In contrast, Manawatu and Palmerston North were starting to trend down over that time. We have had an increase, but at a much slower, a much smaller increase than the national trend. MSD is also publishing some weekly data for benefits. This is the job seeker recipients. And seen a very quick change in the region once we began to move into level 3, level 2. Drop of 255 people off the benefit in terms of net numbers in the week to the 22nd of May. Only 3 regions had a decline. Hawke's Bay 44, West Coast 9. So, so there's actually quite a contrast emerging across the region here compared with the rest of New Zealand. It's also being reflected in retail spending. You can see very clear impact, pretty constant, about 55% drop during level 4, and then an acceleration through level 3 and level 2. The week ending the 17th of May was only 4 days under level 2, and most councils in the region actually saw growth during that time. We didn't quite achieve growth. We were ahead of the New Zealand trend, but that's typically Massey Graduation Week, which brings in over $500,000 of extra spending into the city that week. So that was why we didn't quite reach some growth under those first 4 days of level 2, but 10% growth in spending in the last week. Of course, not everyone in the retail sector is sharing that. Hospitality accommodation was still down 23%. Interestingly, fuel spending was still down 11%. The really high rate of growth was home and recreational. It's up 66% on the same week a year ago. So people did really get out and spend once the shops were open. Housing concerns. Yeah, we had that peak in 2018 with Papeoa, Bupa consents coming through. A bit of a slowdown, but if you look at the trend, it's still upwards. And over the next couple of months, we're going to see a further surge, over 500 houses a year, with a further Papeoa consents coming through, Bupa and Wallace, and a range of developers starting more multi-unit developments in the city. February was a record month for us in terms of the value of consents, $48 million. That's been broken again in May. Provisional data we've got just for the consents process through the City Council is around 76 million. Kāinga Ora is now processing its own building consent, so we need to have a conversation with about getting their data, but it will flow through into the Statistics New Zealand data, but we have to wait a further month to get hold of their information. One of the things that does help us is a very strong difference in weighting between domestic and international. And also even the domestic and international is a very strong visiting friends and family share. So if you look at employment in the accommodation sector, it's less than 1% of national employment in that sector. So even our commercial accommodation sector is a small city of the size because of that high share of people staying with friends and family. In early March, I had the opportunity to go to a workshop with a commercial arm of Statistics New Zealand that's working on some new visitor data. And one of the things they were focusing on with MB was around the seasonality of visitor flows, and regions should be focusing on trying to even out that seasonality. Because going back to that unemployment data, when I looked at regions like Southland, Otago, the increase in job seekers wasn't as much as I had expected. But then when I looked at the data, of course, I realised a lot of those workers who have lost their jobs had been those casual workers, short-term workers, international workers. So they haven't actually been able to go onto the benefit. The interesting thing about the Palmerston North data they put up at the workshop is we had an almost perfect circle. So right throughout the year, we've got visitor flow coming in, both for international and domestic. And so it's a much more stable employment environment for workers in that sector. Just the other, there was a bit of discussion about student numbers. I do an annual survey of the institutions. I haven't had the data in yet from IPU, but it was encouraging that this is a snapshot as at the 31st of March, that the international student numbers were actually a lot more stable than I had expected. So just in terms of outlook, we still have an ongoing shortage of housing in the region. We have all these major projects getting underway that are going to sort of add to the pressure. I do actually have some concerns about housing affordability with the Reserve Bank cutting interest rates so low. It's taken all the restrictions off investors and homeowners in terms of how much that they can borrow, and doesn't seem to be a lot of indication of house prices and housing demand slowing. So that it's it's good to see some more housing getting underway, but that is going to be a challenge for us. And, you know, we are going to see some weakness in economic activity, but it looks like Palmerston North is really going to be leading growth in the region, but particularly driven by construction. The other thing that has really helped us, and was fortunate we bought the data at the end of last year, was just that really high government share of earnings in the sector. We weren't able to get the average for New Zealand, but in terms of jobs, around 29% of jobs are in a government institution or government-owned organisation in the city, and the share for New Zealand is about 17%. So that really does caution us through these times. And just a quick snapshot of the latest IMF forecasts. These are April 2020. They have revised their forecast down from March, but still forecasting quite a quick recovery in world economic activity once companies begin to emerge from their COVID.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Linda. I intend to take question-free reports. Are there any questions? No, that seems to be fairly Mr. Mayor.
Can't let you go, Peter. Nice shirt too. It's very nice. With the unemployment figures, you know, you paint a picture that Palmerston North is faring reasonably well to date. Are there any other cities that you spoke about, some other regions, but remembering region? Are there any other cities that are faring a similar vein to us that you know of?
I had a quick look at the latest regional data, and Gisborne was the only one that had the smallest total increase. But yeah, we've been the quickest to see those numbers. Just in terms of numbers, there's still around 2,000 more people on a benefit across the region than was at the start. But that's around 2% of the total workforce. And unemployment rate across the region was getting down to about 5.5%.
Useful presentation.
Councillor Dingle.
Mr. Chair, thank you. With just on page 32.8, the average value of dwellings in Palmerston North is 500K to 504. How much is the lowest value of dwellings in Palmerston? What is the price of the cheapest kind of houses that you can actually get here?
We can really only let data out when we do the 3-yearly valuations. But we are quite unusual as a city, I think, because we don't have big distinctions between suburbs. The difference between the lower quartile and the median and the upper quartile is actually quite small. But that was in the National Policy Statement report produced last year. I don't have the actual number. There's actually quite a flat market once you've got to that sort of that first quartile.
So just with looking at the figures of how much it actually costs sort of buy a house in Palmerston North at the moment, and the figures that you can get from government around, you know, first home grants and things like that, where the cap for an affordable, the cap to actually get a home loan is 400,000. Do you think that that is appropriate, given that these are kind of the numbers that we're getting there?
Well, if you look at the main centres, we are catching up with Christchurch, but Invercargill is the only other sort of urban area with a population of 50,000 or more cheaper than Palmerston North. So yeah, I haven't had a close look at those rules recently. Yeah, within this region, Napier, Hastings are getting close to the 600,000 mark, over Plymouth, Rotorua, all expensive, around 800,000 now. Wanganui had a 32% increase in the in prices in the 12 months to April. So there's really extreme pressure outside the city.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that concludes questions. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Linda. There is a recommendation on the screen to move that. Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Finlay. That is that the summary report on the March 2020 Postal Quarterly Economic Monitor, major developments and quarterly retail report for April 2020 are received. Are there any comments? None. I will put favour, against, abstentions. That's carried. Councillors, I'm conscious, so we will take our afternoon break now, which seems to be 20 minutes thereabouts. So we'll come back at 3 o'clock.
Sorry, did I scare you?
You did.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, you did.
Right, thank you, councillors. If you could take a seat, please. Okay, thank you. We're now up to item number 10, and councillors, just conscious of time, we also have a workshop to attend to today. So this is the Business Improvement District Policy. Keegan and David, you can take the report as being read, but given this is the first time that the policy in this form has hit the public domain, is there any additional commentary that you wish to provide?
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Tangi. Yeah, just some very brief points. I think, a bid is a partnership between the city, the council and the city centre, supported by a targeted rate, which allows the city centre then provide projects and services for the benefit of the city centre. So it's, it's self-funded. That's the key thing. These are very common in New Zealand. For instance, 48 bids in Auckland, 5 bids in Wellington. So this was flagged in our city centre plan when the last strategic direction was prepared. There was some funding provided. A bid leadership group has been formed and turned into incorporated society. We've had a temporary bid relationship manager out talking to the stakeholders. There's an initial register being prepared. And I guess really the policy is to bring all this together. So the policy clarifies the process and responsibilities for the bid to be formally established. We've based the policy on other examples, particularly Wellington, Hastings and Hamilton. It's been through a finance and legal review. It is focused around the city centre, but there can be bid proposals come from other parts of the city. Some key next steps really are for us to update the register, particularly of tenants within the city centre, confirm the boundaries and the proposed rate in collaboration with the leadership group. Just in terms of voting, just to be clear, in terms of there will be a formal vote on the establishment of the bid. So that requires a 25% turnout with a 50% majority. All landlords and tenants will get to vote on the establishment of the bid. If you own 5 properties, you get 5 votes. If you've got a building with 5 tenants in it, all 5 tenants will get to vote. If it passes, it then goes into the LTP for consultation prior to implementation. So the policy enables all that to occur. So there's still a number of processes to follow. So Keegan and I have to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
City council, as a landlord, would they be part of this bid as well? Or would we be part of the bid?
Well, the council doesn't pay rates, but we would have.
The council wouldn't pay rates, so wouldn't be a voting party, I suppose, in the bid itself. But there's, I suppose, what the front end of this policy provides is that relationship expectation between a bid proponent and then a bid association and the council, naturally because the bid is applying a typically local government mechanism of a rating to a different, slightly different use. So there's, I suppose, the policy in itself lays out that expectation of a contractual arrangement between the two parties.
Okay, so therefore, our tenants, would they be limited to what they can be involved, their involvement or not?
So tenants can hold a vote.
So they'll be able to vote even though we couldn't. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. The policy outlines the 3 options for the draft targeted rate, the 3 methods there. And I'm just looking on page 77 at that flow diagram, and where it says draft targeted rate in the second part down, is that a decision about the amount of the targeted rate or the method or both? I guess what I'm wanting to understand is, will business owners understand which method is being used before they vote, or can that be decided, will that be decided after they vote?
It would be likely to be before they vote, so that they understand not just the, I suppose, the benefits, but then also the consequences in terms of, you know, financially, what does that mean for them and their business?
Yeah, and just further to that, so once that vote's been taken, but with I think somewhere it said the 25% minimum businesses needing to get it over 50%. Is that a binding decision? And the reason I'm asking, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, is page 82 at the bottom. It's got the last sentence there. It says, in making that decision, the council will consider but will not be bound by the poll result. And I'm just wondering, does that mean the council could proceed with it without reaching that target? Or does it just mean that it may not proceed with it if it's over that target?
Technically both. So the discretion is in the council with respect to, I suppose, who it lets in to be able to utilise a targeted rate. So if it's a narrow minority, but there's reasons to move forward with it, then council can consider that. Or if there's a narrow majority and council's really not comfortable, it can decline. That's mainly with respect to, I suppose, the application of the targeted rate rather than the establishment of the bid. So there is a moment in that flow chart where the bid is established but hasn't yet got the rating mechanism set up.
And just one final question, if that's okay, Mr. Chair, on page 67 refers to, sorry, just finding it. The consultant costs for the poll, where is it? Sorry, I can't find it, but it talks about the next stage, taking on a consultant to conduct that process. And I'm just wondering if that's it, what the cost of that is, and whether it's already budgeted or if it's addition to, or how that's funded.
So we anticipate we can cover that with an existing budget. So the conversations we've had with other councils is that the cost of the poll when it's delivered by a sort of external elections company is about, well, for instance, the Hastings one costs $5,000. So the cost of the poll is not significant, and some of it would absorb within existing budgets.
Okay, thank you.
And we had Steve Patterson's on the video, and he's had an involvement in the policy, assisting Keegan and I. And he just clarified in relation to Councillor Finlay's question that the council would technically be considered a ratepayer and would be eligible to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My question's around 6.2 around the accountability. I'll just get back to it, sorry. So first of all, accountability to council. So it says if council had a serious concerns, where council has serious concerns with performance, the bid targeted rate may be withheld. What kind of serious concerns would you be thinking of in those? I mean, what would class as a serious concern there?
I suppose seriously not aligning with the funding agreement that would be set up in order to deliver the targeted rate. So if they were funding things that were wildly outside of expectations from that partnership.
Okay. So is there an expectation that the bid would fund things that were in line with council's strategic direction? Is there any contractual or otherwise influence on the bid from council that anything that the bid does fits within that council strategic direction?
There's the diagram 2 on page 75 kind of highlights a little bit of that. So where BID has a direct role in delivering, for instance, the city centre plan and placemaking plan, and where the BID can influence outcomes. Now, that's not an expectation that the BID agree with council on all operational matters and delivering those outcomes, but there's I suppose there's a expectation that the way the BID moves forward is in parallel with the way the city moves forward.
And so if the bid were to go in the opposite direction, say, I mean, I can't think of an example, but do something that was obviously opposed to council's strategic direction, would that be grounds for serious concerns?
I mean, yeah, it would depend. Without I suppose illustrating the point with something wildly unlikely. Let's just go there. So investing in solar farms in Australia or something like that as a way of getting more out of that investment from that targeted rate. Mm-hmm. That's not delivering on any outcomes under the strategic direction or likely their strategic direction. So yeah, there's an expectation that I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so if, for example, the bid wanted to employ a private security firm to patrol the CBD and deal with any what they might be considered to be undesirable people in the CBD, would that be within the bounds of what they could do?
You've got a lot of bids here and overseas that do engage in, I suppose, a more positive form of community policing. One example was Hastings bid. They actually hire a bunch of grandmothers and mothers that can be employed to help boost the profile of youth and the engagement with youth, so it's a little less us and them. Likewise, in other areas of the states where their police departments are very much entwined in their city council operations, where there's no levels of service to have a dedicated police officer in the city centre, then they top that up with their own.
Okay, so that would be well within the bounds of what policy would allow.
Well, we currently provide for a summer stint of community engagement, people on the ground. So, yes.
Okay, and what's the accountability to the wider residents of the city? So we've got the link between the bid and the accountability to the businesses that make up the bid, and we've got the link between the bid and council. Where's the accountability to the wider population? Where does that come in?
Well, there may be consultation expectations with respect to certain size projects in a bid funding grant, for instance, or just wider engagements, much like what the Chamber and CEDA already engage with in a similar way.
And where would we be able to ensure that they were put in? At what stage would we be able to say that we'd expect consultation on wider projects, for example? I mean,
well,
at what point does that need to be established? Is it after we've gone out and consulted and it's in the annual plan, or is it at this point?
With the requirement for the bid to prepare a strategic plan, I think the obligation for broader accountability to the community sits with the council to make sure that the strategic plan that the bid is putting forward to the council aligns with elected members' expectations of the way the city's being managed, particularly the city centre. So remember, the targeted rate only applies to the city centre stakeholders. I take your point, though, that the council's facilitating a process for the benefit of the city centre, but I think the accountability in terms of the expectations of the broader community sits around this table.
Okay, so in terms of ensuring that the bid strategic plan is suitable to council and therefore the wider community, would we expect that would be an annual accountability, or I just don't see where these checks and balances come into this policy. That's what concerns me, I suppose. And I'm wondering if they're not in the policy, at what point do they come in?
The 3-yearly LTP cycle would be the natural point of checking in, but there is annual reporting requirements as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen. Further on accountability, was trying to understand, I guess, what the actual mechanism was going to be there. I guess there's some reference to a funding agreement. Is that a contract that's signed between our management and bids management?
Yes.
And is that, I guess, do we have a sense of how that's going to look in terms of what accountability will actually be in there?
Yes, so there's, I mean, there's a template example that Auckland uses that is available online, and what that essentially is stating is expectations and timelines or frequencies of reports, what's in those reports, reporting lines, the nature of that.
Great, thank you. And then just in section 9, which is page 83 of our agenda, at the end of it, it says that the council may require the bid association to have an annual accountability agreement. And I was just trying to understand, is that a separate contract? Is that another element of the same contract?
It may in cases be separate, but at the same time, if the processes fit at the same time, then it may fit in within the same document.
I guess probably where I'm most interested in this is that it says that we may, which means we may not. Might be a bit too tough. You know, so are we really strong enough in this policy when we're bringing, you know, the full power of our ability to conscript rates off of, could be 60-70% of the people don't want to pay the rate, but it's still got, you know, through on the vote. We're bringing that full power to bear to conscript that fund. Are we being strong enough in terms of accountability here?
There's no reason why that couldn't be must. I guess may allows some trust to build up between the bid association and the council. If you have concerns, then the may can become a must.
And how would the may become a must? We'd have to then bring the policy back here to adjust it after we'd seen it go to custard?
No, may allows you to implement annual accountability. It's just your decision as to, well, the council's decision as to whether that happens or not. So that if there was concerns from elected members or management around the performance, then clearly the may, in terms of interpretation, would then become a must. And may gives you the option. It doesn't say you can't.
Yep, good point. Thank you. So I guess picking up on recommendation 3, which identifies minor amendments going through the chair, would replacing a may with a must in the last point of section 9, in your view, qualify as a minor amendment, or would we need a resolution here to address that?
Well, I'll make a comment on that. My view is that that is not a minor amendment, because you effectively are saying that it is a mandatory requirement rather than not. So, Councillor, if you wish to make the change, then I suggest you, if this is moved, then make the amendment at this meeting.
Great, thank you. I think that gets me where I need to be in terms of that area. Also wanted to ask finally about section 8. I think it was in section 8. Yeah, just towards the top of it. The discussion about increasing the boundary, and it made it, to my reading of it, if say another 20 businesses wanted to join up, they could just have a little vote amongst themselves and then be there. and didn't seem to give any weight to the wider bids view on that, the other people that are already in there. And is that really, have I read that correctly, I suppose? And are we really setting up a system where just people can just sort of glom on once it's up and going?
Yes, but still maintaining that the bid association board is accountable to the existing bid until an extension is made. So there is that to play with. And I suppose that what that's written in there is standard across bid policies in New Zealand.
I guess the scenario that I'm contemplating is one where you have, quite a different, let's say, flavor of business or a community, but they might actually see some benefits in sort of tacking themselves on because of geographic proximity, et cetera. So just what are the checks and balances in there around the wider interest of the bid? We invest a lot to get it going, not being sort of dragged down perhaps by others jumping on board.
So just remember, it can't just be 10 businesses that then decide to add themselves and force a vote to increase the boundary. It would have to be the bid proponent brings that boundary change in. So as Keegan said, the bid association represents the entire area. So if the 10 landowners who wanted to join it, they would have to first convince the bid proponent of the benefits of that extension. So the bid proponent of the bid association would then have to look at that relative to their overall goals. So as Keegan said, the accountability still sits with that bid association, which is representative of the whole group. It wouldn't just be those 10 landowners forcing a vote on the extension of the pole.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 67 of the agenda, and it says 48,000 unbudgeted expenditure. It says the chief executive will seek to absorb these $48,000. I mean the unbudgeted. I'm guessing that this expenditure was made last year, and was that already adjusted in the previous budget? And if yes, have we spent any more money on this bid since then?
So that additional $48,000 was within this financial year. So that cost has now been incurred. So the bid association or the chamber who's running that process has invoiced the council for that $48,000. There hasn't been any additional costs in this financial year over and above that $48,000.
Thank you.
Sorry, aside from some staff costs and some legal costs associated with preparing the policy.
Thank you. I'll leave it there.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, David and Keegan, for the report. It was just a follow-up question about, just so that I'm clear, because I wasn't following the previous answer, about the status of council itself as a CBD building owner and occupier. So I think you said Steve had popped in and said, we are a ratepayer, so we would be in?
Yeah, Steve passed the message on to Hannah, who indicated that his view was that the council is a ratepayer and would be eligible to vote.
And that seemed to be news. Are we expecting that council is a ratepayer and would be eligible to vote in the bid proponent?
The policy just basically stipulates that anyone that doesn't attract a commercial rate currently is not eligible to vote. So if the council attracts a rate, then it attracts a vote.
So is that what, I might be verging into comment here, but I suppose I'm asking for your view on whether council should be voting in the setting up of the bid.
I think regardless of, obviously it's something we can clarify, this is new work for us, but regardless of what the policy says, the council can make a decision not to vote, even if it has the option to vote. My understanding is there may be some differences between the types of council properties. So some of the properties we own that are more for commercial lease may well be subject to rates, whereas things like roads and other bits and pieces of property that we own, more public assets, aren't. But I don't know whether Steve's available online, wants to comment if he's listening in, or Stuart, but.
And does so do those words attract a commercial rent mean pay a commercial rent? Because council might, in theory, attract a rent, but we don't pay it. Do you see what I mean? Are those the same things?
I'm meaning in terms of pay, yes.
Okay.
I understand that we have Steve online. So Steve, if you're with us, do you wish to comment?
Yes, councillors. The council is a ratepayer, and in the terms of the bid policy, as I see it, because those properties are rated, most of them, as commercial or non-residential properties, then by that definition, the council would pay the targeted rate on those properties, and therefore also be subject or be capable of being on the roll to vote. So it'd be up to the council to choose whether it voted or not, as was said. But as the policy is written, that would mean, though, that the council is a commercial ratepayer in the same way as the Crown is, for example, and for some of its properties in the centre of the city.
Do we have any idea of the number of votes the council? Where I'm going here is we're saying a 25% vote. 50% of a 25% is council the 25%.
In terms of number of ratepayers, no, it wouldn't be. The council in the area that's proposed, I haven't counted up just how many properties there would be, but they're mainly reasonably significant buildings like the Civic Centre itself, the Regent Theatre, the library or parts of it, and they'd be the main ones that I can think of in the central bit. But I think relative to the total number of properties, not that many really.
Okay.
And remember, the 25% is landlords and tenants. So, you know, there's a number of single buildings with a significant number of tenants. So we think the register will be well up over 1,000 plus people that will be eligible to vote.
So do I take from that then, David, your advice is that should council vote on this as a voting block, it wouldn't be significant?
That's my understanding of from what Steve said, and my understanding of the number of tenants. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just check, does the CFO wish to add anything?
No, I think Steve was bang on. There is a few, we have quite a few commercial tenants under the library building and in the CAB. So a reasonable number of tenants, but our building ownership is not large in number.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a couple of other questions that have come up as a result of answers that have been given. On the question of accountability, in terms of the decisions that council makes around establishing a targeted rate, I think, David, your answer was that those decisions can be made through the LTP. And I just wanted to get clarification if those decisions can be made through annual budgets as well.
Yeah, so the targeted rate would be applied annually, just like any other rate. And I said that the LTP would be a natural sort of 3-year period to sort of review the performance of the bid. But if the council was dissatisfied with the performance of the bid, the policy would allow it to cancel it at any particular annual budget.
Thank you. And just one more question related to the issue that's just been discussed around council owned facilities where there are tenants. So would the council just get one vote per facility, or just one vote overall? And who would be deciding on which way the council voted if it did have a vote? Or are we just assuming the council would vote for?
So under the policy, the council would get one vote per property in the city centre. We'd have to look at, it's probably not a matter that's covered under existing delegations, so we'd have to have a look at who would make that decision.
Thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David, it would be easy enough for us to change the policy to exclude council from this, wouldn't it?
If you wanted to exclude council, you could do that.
Yeah, so we would just put through a recommendation now to do that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll put that through.
Thank you. There don't seem to be any further questions. So Keegan and David, thank you. Now, in terms of, there are a number of recommendations on the screen. The ones that are in the order paper are going to be moved by Councillor Harberter. Is there a seconder for those recommendations? Seconded by the Mayor. Now, I've also number 4, I think, Natalia, if you could just... This is from Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Rutherford. And it refers to the section 9, page 83, where it would effectively be changing, once it comes up, changing the may to must, so it would be a requirement for accountability. Is that correct, Councillor Barrett?
Correct.
Okay. I intend to, even though that is somewhat of an amendment, I intend to take that as a separate one because the policy approved, and then we can tidy up with some of these other things, and likewise what Councillor Beattie is bringing forward.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
if we
Councillor
approve
Johnson.
the policy before we approve the additional recommendation, is that not the wrong way of going about it? Because then we'll have approved it. Should we not approve the additional recommendation or vote it down first before we go to the policy?
Yes, my intention is to take comment on all 4 and then to take number 4 before we actually take the adoption of the policy.
Thank you.
If we get to that point.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So I have an additional recommendation, Councillor Beattie, that council not be included as a member of the bid or have voting rights. Can I just get a comment from staff around implication in terms of whether council would be paying the targeted rate?
Yeah, so if the resolution you passed was simply a vote, but the bid was still passed, the council would still be required to pay the rate. So it depends. My understanding of the conversation, the council was concerned about the influence the council, the way that it may be perceived in terms of the council influencing or otherwise the vote.
Sure.
So if the council doesn't vote, just be aware the council would still pay the target rate.
Okay, so Councillor Beattie, is that what you were seeking? All right, do I have a seconder? That's seconded by Councillor Finlay. Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, just a question on Councillor Beattie's additional recommendation.
Yes.
So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, if council's not a member of the bid, does that mean council doesn't pay the targeted rate?
I think Mr. Murphy had just indicated.
So if the council doesn't vote, what it's saying is it doesn't want to participate in the discussion about whether the bid is put in place.
Yeah.
Once the outcome of the vote is known, if the bid has been put in place, council would pay the target rate just like everyone else.
Okay, but in future, say when there was a discussion in the bid about whether or not to do X or Y, council would have no vote on that either? Or are we just saying no vote at the start?
Well,
Just
just
to be clear.
Whether you want to exclude, whether the elected members want to exclude council from the establishment, the vote also kicks in for any alterations to the rate or the or boundary adjustments.
Okay.
If the council is affected by a boundary adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
What I intend to do is to take comment on all recommendations, and then in terms of voting on them, we will make sure that we deal with number 4 and 5 before we actually move to vote on adopting the policy as it would then be amended. So I'll now open it up for any comments. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very supportive of the concept and very supportive of where the draft policy has gotten to at this stage. It's, yeah, to me, a very, very sensible thing for us as a city to be doing to actually support this initiative. The reason that I did bring a further recommendation is that I'm also conscious that this is ultimately setting up a mechanism that will create a rate, and rates are a tax that can script money off of people, in some cases money that have voted against or people that have chosen not to vote. And I think especially in those circumstances when it is money obtained in that way, we do need a strong accountability mechanism, and it's only reasonable that there should be an accountability agreement that is routinely used. And I don't think it should be seen as a sign of mistrust. It was sort of suggested that there could be maybe a trust building sort of approach. And I don't think that having a contract or an accountability agreement is actually a sign of mistrust. I think it's just a clarification and a way to ensure that everyone is in fact on the same page when we're actually putting these. So I would urge you to, if you're feeling predisposed towards the approval of the bid, that you also would seek to approve recommendation 4 around requiring an accountability agreement. We'll listen with interest to the discussion around the council having a vote, council being an active part of. The reality is we do have a lot of interest in the city centre, and I'm interested to think about how we actually balance making sure that we're proactive in this space with not being the driver, or not being seen to be the driver, or painted to be the driver. So I'm interested to hear what other members have to say on that particular element. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to, I'm supportive of the bid, and I'm happy for must over may. That's sound for my mind, but it's just around the voting and our ability or right to have a vote. I think I'm really reluctant to push out now without really seeing the unintended consequences of not having been seen as a stakeholder in a city bid. It doesn't mean that we have to exercise our right to vote. We could always abstain, but I see having a vote gives us the ability to equally speak or promote the bid or different initiatives that come through and give our voice to that, rather than not having a vote and being seen as a silent external party, seeing the potential problems that might exist, but without giving it supported voice for the initiative. So that's where my reservations lie. I'm going to oppose not having the vote. I think it's a separate decision whether we should exercise it, and certainly feel like we could be quite limited in the future if we weren't able to have a voice around some initiatives that would actually bring great benefit to the inner city. So we are contributing whether we vote or not by the sounds, and I think we should equally have some influence. People do look to us to be the influence on a lot of things in the city, and I just don't think we should be taking a completely hands-off approach when it comes to this bid initiative. Thank you.
Yeah. The Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I support all 4. This is really about businesses helping themselves, and actually in most cases, councillors, business normally don't want council. They want council to get out of the way, because we do inhibit things at times, even though we're very familiar with our own circle here. But I will support number 4. I'm okay with a contract where the bid does come and present to the council of the day. I think that's fair and reasonable. And I suppose number 5, I'm also okay and comfortable with that. Not having a vote, we still will be a significant partner in this bid if it succeeds. And not having a vote, I don't think it's really going to. We really do need the vast majority of businesses wanting this. Otherwise, we are fraught with possible issues later on. But that by and large businesses have supported this, that the bid has a strong mandate from the CBD. Post-COVID, who knows what that will do, but I'd say the work that the bid would do would be very, very helpful in the challenging times that we'll face in the coming months and years. So I'm supportive of all four, and I ask you to support them as well. Thank you.
Councillor Habiter.
Thank you. I just as long as what the Mayor said, I'm really supportive of 1 to 4. I think 4 is actually a very good alternative to what wasn't there. So I think must is really important for the Chamber, and I think the work that the Chamber has done with the Council in developing the policy and getting us to this point has been really important. I think the bid is a really good process going forward for us, and it helps us put something in place for what we haven't had before. Seeing other cities putting it in place has been really good. I'm not sure about number 5. I do feel for the tenants that are in the buildings, and I'm not sure what 5 does to those tenants that are renting our building. So I'm not sure how it works. So I'm not sure if I'll vote for number 5. I want to hear what the mover's intention is. So I will wait to hear what the mover has to say about number 5. Not sure about it yet.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, as you would have detected from my questions, my main concerns around this policy was the lack of accountability to the wider residents of the city. And to some degree, the answers that I received to my questions indicated that the accountability to the wider city is something that is going to be mediated, if you like, through us as a council. And therefore, I think it's extremely important that we have at least the annual accountability that additional recommendation 4 gives us, because so far this has been mostly worked on with the business community, and we haven't really socialised this very much in the wider resident community. I don't know whether there'll be support for it or not, but I do think we need a strong accountability mechanism through the Chamber, if that's what it is, to make sure that we don't authorise a bid to go off and do things to the CBD that the rest of the residents of the city object to. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves as the meat in the sandwich, and I don't fancy to be in that position, quite honestly. So I'm happy with 4. As you all know, I mean, I'm lukewarm about the bid, to be honest. But if that's what business wants, well, then I'm prepared to accept it. In terms of number 5, which is the whether or not the council has a vote, I think it's entirely wrong for us to have a vote on both sides of this. We can't have a vote from within the bid and be the organisation that does the checks and balances on accountability. So I'm going to support 5 because I think it would be wrong for us to be voting on one side and doing accountability on the other. That's not right. Thanks.
Councillor Finlay.
I'll support all 5, particularly number 5. The reason that I asked initially whether the council would be part of the bid, I can't reconcile myself how the council can be on 2 sides. How can they be the controller and the controllee? So, but by doing this, saying the council does not have a vote, it still allows our tenants to have a vote. It doesn't say that our tenants can't vote, it just says the council can't vote. But our tenants will still be able to be an active part involved in it. I really think it's quite wise for us not to be seen to be being in a situation where we could have the sway in a vote and make it go our way as such. I'm very, very convinced that we need to be outside of the voting process and there as the governance, not the participants. So yeah, I support all 5.
Councillor Beattie.
My rationale around it is it's a bit like the airport board. We own the airport board, but we have a board, but we don't vote on that, and we're accountable for it. The bid, we've enabled it and we're accountable for it. If we have a vote, we own half a dozen buildings, so we get 6 votes. And just to confirm, yes, under this policy, that every tenant of ours will get the vote. So there's no mistakes about that. But who is going to vote? Are we going to allocate that to a portfolio holder or a council staff member? So when that person goes along and votes and we don't agree with that. So I think we've got issues all around that. Council is a big organisation, so who has the power to vote? If there is a decision made that the ratepayers don't like, we're out of that. We can stand aside because we didn't vote either way. So I just think we should be completely independent, but be an enabler and make sure there's accountability and that the bid is getting the outcomes for the ratepayers. We can't be on both sides of the fence, as was mentioned.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, speaking in favour of all 5 of the recommendations, but particularly that last one. I think what I took from the officer's answers to the questions is this is about the perception rather than the reality. In reality, council wouldn't be a significant block of votes, but the perception, as other colleagues have alluded to, might be that we do sway the discussion, that we have disproportionate power from the amount of votes that we would table. So I do think it's a safer position for council to take, to be not included on the voting register, so that we can bring a neutrality to the proceedings. But we will still be paying, so everybody should be happy with that they still get our money.
Thank you. And there are no further Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little bit uncertain as to whether the post-COVID environment is the most ideal environment for businesses to be considering adding an additional tax. However, it may be that they see the benefit, that there's enough benefit in them for them to do that. So I think it's fair for them to decide that for themselves. I guess I support the additional recommendations, particularly the 5th one, as I think it's really important, even though council has been behind getting the bid proposal to this point. I think it is really important that we do take a neutral position on it while it is being voted by the businesses. I think someone said, we need to get out of the way. And I think this next season, it is important that we allow businesses to determine that for themselves without sort of looking to be persuading one way or another, because, businesses, if it means they're going to have to pay an extra $300 or $400 a year, they need to be committed to this themselves rather than feeling like they've been, particularly when there's a 12.5%, it could be a 12.5% or just over in businesses in favour of this, that it would go ahead. So I think it's important that there is a strong support from the business for us to really look to proceed with this. So I'm happy to support it at this point, but looking to really get a strong sense from the business community as to whether this is something they're really wanting at this time.
Thank you. That concludes the comments. So we'll now move to voting. Natalia, can you take us to recommendation number 1, please? So this recommendation is to simply receive the memo and the policy. I haven't heard any dissent, so I intend to deal with that one on the voices. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. We can go to recommendation number 4. So this is proposed by Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Rutherford, which will make it mandatory requirement for accountability that the last paragraph of section 9 of the policy be revised to state the council will prepare and require the bid association to complete an annual accountability agreement on terms satisfactory to the council. Now, does anyone wish to have this by way of division for this one? No requests, so I will then put that on the voices. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. If we can now move to recommendation number 5, which has been proposed by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Finlay, that council not be included on the voting register but will be liable for the targeted rate. So that is the motion. We will deal with this by way of division.
Councillor Naylor. 4. 4. Councillor Hancock. 4. 4. Councillor Meehan. 4. 4. Councillor Johnson. 4. 4. Councillor Dingwall. 4. 4. Councillor Hapita. 4. 4. Councillor Dennison.
Yep, 4.
4. Councillor Finlay. 4. 4. Councillor Petrinas.
4.
4. Councillor Barrett.
4.
4. Councillor Bowen. 4. Councillor Butt. 4. Deputy Mayor Tukere.
4.
4. Mayor Smith.
4.
4. Councillor Beattie. 4. Councillor Rutherford.
4.
4.
That is carried 16 in favour and none against. So we'll move to recommendation number 2. Thank you. That the Business Improvement District Policy 2020 as attached to the memorandum reported to 3rd June Economic Development Committee be adopted, but I think we need to put in there as amended. So if Councillor Hapita and the Mayor are comfortable with just including that, just to make sure that we've captured those other two. Now, are people comfortable to do this on the voices, or is there a request for division? Okay, I'll do it on the voices. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Abstentions? Carried. And the final one is number 3, which is minor amendments. Again, I'll propose to do them on the voices. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Abstentions? That's carried. That concludes that item. Thank you. We move to item number 11, which is the portfolio update. And Councillor Hapita, you can take your report as being read, but anything to add?
Just very quickly, if you don't want to dwell on this, it was done with the input from all our team members. We actually wrote the scope back in December, and just looking at page 106, the next steps, we've talked about the shuttle, which is new, and Councillor Hancock might want to update you on the shuttle.
Thank you, Councillor Hapita, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, is that you'll recall that I think during the budget conversations that we had some weeks back, I did mention a shuttle, just in some of the questions that that we were traversing at the time. Following that budget workshop, I went away and probably just put together some of my thinking around why a shuttle within the CBD might actually benefit, or at least be worth thinking about for the future for the CBD. I subsequently emailed Mayor Smith and just with some more sort of coherent thinking around some of the ideas that that sort of underpinned my initial question. But the CBD has had at times, I think, a contentious history where there's been sort of adverse commentary around sort of the viability of some parts of the CBD, and of course things like parking and the plaza, the extension of the plaza and things like that have caused some debate in terms of retailers and businesses within the CBD. Our square is lauded in terms of being the largest green space within a city in the Southern Hemisphere, but that in itself actually brings a few problems for our city in terms of sort of the I guess the continuity or the cohesiveness of businesses and retailers within the CBD. So our business area is a little bit spread out around the square, around the periphery, so it causes us some issues. But there's a whole lot of other reasons that sort of underpin that, and I can send those that narrative out to everybody if they so wish. But
once I spoke to Mayor Smith, he said, well, this was a good idea, but I'm not the first person to have this idea. So he educated me about the trackless tram concept and the tram trust, which was an idea from a number of business people in Palmerston North going back to 2000 actually. And the charitable trust was formed and still exists today. But they had an idea of actually having a trackless tram within the CBD. And they actually had, in principle, some agreements around where the tram would actually travel around the CBD. And that was really sort of, the idea was really, it was an e-vehicle. So they've done a lot of research in terms of the viability of electric vehicles, sort of that heavy vehicles. And we've spoken with Paul O'Brien. He's given us a really good update in terms of some of the technological advances that have actually taken place in recent months, in recent years. And also because of the technology advances, the cost of a tram has actually come down considerably from when they first talked about it. So we've talked to Paul O'Brien, of course, is Chamber of Commerce, and he's the chair of the Tram Trust. And he's provided me with sort of a bit of a, I suppose, some learnings around knowledge gaps that I certainly had about that, and he's provided that information for me. So I can also circulate that around other councillors if they so wish. But I guess the next steps really are to, we have not yet discussed this with either the Chamber or CEDA, and we also need to probably have a conversation, I guess, with Horizons. And also, I guess there is an opportunity perhaps to get the Tram Trust at some point to come back and actually talk to councillors about where they're at. So that's where we are kind of sitting at the moment. I emailed both Councillor Harpenter and Mayor Smith yesterday saying, look, I've received this from Paul O'Brien. So we're really starting to think about our next steps in terms of where we can take it. But I guess the reality is that my experience of problem solving is that there is never just one silver bullet. There is often a suite of things that we need to pull together to resolve issues that we do face from time to time. But the disconnect within our CBD, I think, has probably been something which we've all and former councillors have talked about for many years. And it's certainly something that, as a council, I think we really need to try and sort of resolve that. And this may very well be one of the one thing that we can do to try and resolve it. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions for the portfolio holder? The Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Some people that have visited other Australian cities will have seen similar sort of experiences. I think Ballarat, Newcastle, all the other big Australian cities have these real trams, but actually Newcastle has a trackless tram as well, and it's quite a visitor attraction in its own right. But I think what Councillor Hancock is trying to do here is really look at the connectivity of what is a really large CBD within the inner ring road. It could help with our parking management, as we do want to take some parks out of our CBD. But I think the big one could be actually a gold coin donation type thing, which would assist with visitor and tourism promotion within the city as well. So I think as long as something can be worked out, there seems to be. I mean, there's the electric EV side of it as well. I think if something could be worked out over time, it might be an LTP thing that we could look at with some partners, of course. But I'm fully supportive of the idea at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, Councillor Hancock, were you anticipating that Horizons would pay for this, or where would the money be coming from?
Who pays? Councillor Johnson has not really been come to the surface at this point in time. However, I think the Tram Trust actually have done some work around, I suppose, sharing sharing cost across a number of other businesses around the city, who certainly indicated that they were very interested in some investment in the thing. So really at this point in time, it's time just to explore it as an idea, and I dare say once we've spoken to a whole bunch of other people, some solutions will start to fall out for us.
And when we spoke to Paul O'Brien, he'd actually been to Horizons already, so they've actually done that investigation already with Horizons. So that's why I think we need to actually move things along with Paul.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So have Horizons agreed to fund it?
No, I haven't gone that far. But those discussions had started. That's what we're saying.
Okay, thank you.
I'll look to move the receipt of the update for information, seconded by Councillor Finlay. Any further comment? If not, I'll put those in favour. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Now, final item is the committee. General Manager, got any comments to make?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do want to make just a comment on the sector profiles. We still have to refine the timing of these. They're very much dependent on the input we get from the sector and the time that takes, as well as the availability of data and the timing of that data. So we've got some refinement to do. So I'm not expecting to see 8 or so sector profiles landing in the October meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll move the receipt of that, seconded by Councillor Harper. Any discussion? Being none, I'll put those in favour. Against? Carried. With that, I'll close the meeting and hand over to the Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, apologies for your work.